Welcome to this special edition of Warcraft Reloaded podcast. Today, Mel and I are joined by an extremely special guest in Brian Birmingham. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
This is awesome. This is kind of a bit of a dream come true. So I'm a little nervous. I'll try to get through it. But for any of our audience that might not know who you are, could you quickly tell them what you do at Blizzard?
Sure. I've been at Blizzard about 16 years. I'm a software engineer, and right now I have the great pleasure of being the lead software engineer on the WoW Classic team. I'm one of two leads on that team.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a pretty hefty job too. Yeah, you got a lot of work cut out for you guys. You guys have been busy. It's been great. It's been a lot of really cool stuff to the game changes, and for the most part, I am on board with lots of it.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
Okay, so in an interview with Josh Corbett a while back, you talked about wanting to make the pre-patch longer. Are you guys happy with the decision to make the pre-patch a month?
I think so. That's pretty much what I think it was kind of like a sweet spot where it doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome, but you have enough time to kind of like do the things you want to do and kind of catch up. And we were also looking, as we were looking at the schedule, we were like, when do we fit in the zombie invasion without it like completely dominating the whole pre-patch period? Like, it doesn't have to last a long time, but it's pretty disruptive and also pretty memorable. So we wanted to make sure we had a chance to do it, and also that people would still have a chance to level without it interrupting their leveling process. So overall, I'm pretty happy with where we landed, where it's, enough time for you to get in, get your friends, sort out what you wanted to do, where you want to play, and level up a bit, especially if you wanted to do that, level up naturally rather than pay for the boost to 70. Like, if you want to catch up to your friends naturally, we wanted to make sure you had time and felt like you could do that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been so much fun that just yesterday, my chat was like, "Are you ready for Wrath?" I was like, "I still got time." Oh, it's in a week. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Because I've just been having so much fun. I haven't even itched for it to actually start yet, because I've just been having a blast. So it's great.
A lot of people have been saying that they actually have been having a really good time during this period. But yeah, September 26th, that's the day. So worldwide.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Thank you for 26th. My birthday is the 25th. So if it had come out on the 25th, Bobby would have just ignored me and, would have forgotten about my birthday. So I just have to throw in little reminders, because he's just constantly thinking about Wrath. But yeah, it's all good.
I like that. Day before Wrath, it's my birthday. I like that.
Right. Get prepped.
Yep, she is going to get a Brewfest mount. It's going to be a great present.
Oh, excellent.
What were some of the biggest hurdles that you and your team went through during pre-patch? Some are just one, whichever.
Oh, I would actually say the zombie plague is probably the biggest one. Zombie plague and the Scourge invasion and their interaction. And partly it's because it's an old event, right? That was originally the original Scourge invasion was actually in, I think, 2005 or 6. It was part of Classic when Naxxramas first came out the first time. There was the Scourge invasion. And then they wanted to bring it back, but juiced up for Wrath of the Lich King. And so they brought it back, but with this additional zombie plague element. And they knew, the designers at the time, I remember they were talking about it. We were talking in the hall and kind of laughing about it. They were like, this event is going to be super disruptive. And they were kind of like, we don't think we're going to be allowed to run it the whole time that we have it planned for. I think they actually had it originally planned for 2 weeks, and they knew they were going to have to cut it short. So they kind of built it with little traps and things to turn it off manually on live. And so when we were reconstructing it, we're going through that old data, and I was like, okay, we're looking at we're trying to look at the 3.0 data and the 3.1 data, but we started with the 3.3.5 data for class balance. So we're trying to stitch it all together. And one of the things that we got a little bit messed up was just a miscommunication, just because there's so many moving pieces and complexities with it, was the Scourge invasion part of it, where the Necropolis is attacked and you can farm Scourge stones and things like that. It's supposed to start 3 days after the zombie plague in the data, but we thought it was a week. There was just a miscommunication. The designer rebuilding it was like, oh yeah, it says 3 days. And then we were putting the schedule and we are like, let's do it for a week. And just got our wires crossed. And we're not talking to each other as much as maybe we should. But it's always that mad dash at the end as you're trying to button up all the little things and you find out little things. But ultimately, we're pretty happy with it. A couple extra days of farming Scourge tones where it goes early is not going to really hurt anything. It's really in the player's advantage. And so we weren't really bothered by it. It was mostly okay, we should make another pass on this as it's going out, make sure that we know what the rest of the steps are, including things like we launched new servers. We had to make sure it was spun up there. So I would say that's probably my favorite kind of complex challenge that we had was, we have basically a live event running prior to the live event of launch, and try to make sure keep an eye on that and make sure that it's working properly.
Yeah, it seemed like you guys had a lot of fun with it. I loved the post where someone was like, "Well, it surprised us too."
Yeah, I think that might have been the same one I'm talking about. Yeah, it was funny because like we talked to the designer who rebuilt it, and he's like, "It wasn't a surprise to me. This is exactly what's supposed to happen." And we were like, "We have the schedule." And he's like, "I told you guys 3 days," and we were like, "We told you a week." But
he knew what was going on.
He totally did. I mean, that was the thing. It's like, right, like it wasn't really a blame thing. It was just like, well, what is the situation? How do we fix this now? What's the best path forward? And that's actually one of the things I really like about working on this team is that everybody's like, it's not a blame game. It's always about like, what do we do now? What situation are we in? How do we solve the problem? And like that one turned out to be easy. It was like, okay, well, what happened? It was like, oh, it's triggered off of an in-game timer that runs 3 days after the other event started. Like, oh, do we want that? No, we don't still want that. Well, what do we want? Well, we want it to be controlled by a different time event. And that same designer was like, well, I can build it that way. Like, and so then we just pushed some hot fixes to fix it the way that we wanted it to be.
Nice.
So along with being the most challenging, was that your favorite part of the pre-patch? Because mine personally was level 70 specs with level 80 talents, and just no one really looked into that in the past. It's just been a really neat, trying something new, go and working on the dummy, seeing what that changes. Like, it's been really neat for me. But what's your favorite?
For me, I would say the favorite is the Death Knight. It's always been a favorite class of mine. I remember even back in original vanilla, back in 2004 when I started playing. I guess I actually technically played in 2005. I didn't play at launch, but like right after launch, I started playing, and I played in beta too. But
we'll give it to you.
But when I started playing for real, I was like, oh man, I really wish I could be a Death Knight. Like I remembered them from Warcraft 3, and I was like, I wish there was a way to do that, but there isn't. So I'll do the closest thing I can think of, and I was an undead warrior. And I played that warrior until I remember like they were doing like the designers were like trying to decide what to do for Wrath of the Lich King. They were like, we think we're going to add a new class this time, and we're trying to figure out which one it should be. And they had like 3 choices, and one of them was Death Knight. And I was like, why are there 3 choices? Death Knight's the answer. Like, put me down for Death Knight. Absolutely Death Knight. If you make a Death Knight, I will switch mains. I will play Death Knight forever. And then I did. So I was really excited to be able to play that like original model of the Death Knight that had those 3 different specs, where each spec could do like tanking and DPS, right? Like you could tweak it however you wanted. So like you could make like a Blood Death Knight that was a tank, or a Frost Death Knight that was a tank, or an Unholy Death Knight that was a tank, or any of them is DPS too, right? Like the talents are built so that you can do it kind of however you want. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome about Death Knight is there's not one specific like talent tree that you have to go down for the different class types.
Oh yeah. And for modern Death Knights, it might be fun to remember that like the tanking presence was Frost presence back then. There's the specs and the presences, that were like your like warrior stances. And Frost presence was actually the tanking stance back then before they settled on making it blood in the future. So you would go like, oh yeah, even if you were a blood DK, you would tank in Frost.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a lot of things we did inaccurately in original Wrath of the Lich King and vanilla, like
different from today anyway. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So Joyous Journeys seems to have been just a success across the board. I've not heard anybody that says they don't like it. I mean, I've heard like maybe 1 or 2 people that, but you can turn it off, and so like, has this been like, have you guys thought about maybe making this a mainstay going forward? Like halfway through Wrath, maybe just turning it back on? I don't know. Just curious.
We have talked about that. Like, even when we were first talking about putting it out, we said, like, the longer this is on, the more people are going to expect this to be kind of like the way things are. So we want to make sure we have a clear end date for when it's coming off, so that people at least can plan for that. And it doesn't feel like, such a big loss. Because anytime you give somebody something that like feels like a power increase, right, the longer they keep it, the more it feels like a loss to lose it. So we are planning to take it away with launch on September 26th. And have people level, 70 to 80 or, up to 70 at the normal rate again. And part of that is because once we let you go into Northrend, people are going to be able to earn heirlooms, which also accelerate the level up process. And so we aren't really sure how those 2 things are going to combine. So right now we're going to turn it off, let people go get their heirlooms and have that affect their level up experience. but we aren't ruling out
point.
the idea that we might redo this in the future. Like it definitely was something that encouraged a lot of people to come back and re-level alts. Even like some people were really excited about the fresh start servers, but other people were like, I want to level an alt on my, on my main server where I play all the time because I want a different class this time. And it gives them an opportunity to do that. And then as new people are coming in, it meant that there was this really healthy, vibrant, low level leveling up environment for people to play with each other. So we liked that aspect of it.
Yeah, it was crazy leveling up. I leveled up an alt. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with my alt, but I leveled it because that was fun and it was fast. But it was crazy to see how populated those, just all the zones were, whereas before Joyous Journeys, I feel like if you were leveling an alt, you pretty much had the whole world to yourself, it felt like, except for the rogue. There was always a rogue.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying there was always a rogue. You could always expect that rogue of the opposite faction. Yeah.
There's always an enemy rogue. But yeah, I know what you mean. The thing I really like about it is like focusing everybody into one place at the same time. Is like when we have Joyous Journeys, it's like, oh, this is like the signal, like level your alts, then you're all together doing the same activity. And I think that's one of the things that's really cool is when you have something that like pulls everybody together and you're all doing it together, then it really feels like an MMO. You're like, oh, there's actually other people around and it feels good.
Right.
Unless they take your mob tags and then you're like, dang it.
Invite them to a party. Or if they're the other faction, kill them.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, since the introduction of the social contract, have you and your team seen an instant impact that has given you better leverage for handling situations that in the past may have otherwise been unclear to the player base?
I don't know that that's necessarily for our team. Like we're working primarily on like the game content and whatnot, but we did make sure that we wanted to have that parity with modern World of Warcraft, because it does feel like an important thing in both games that, it's really about like we were just talking about playing with other people. And part of playing with other people is, wanting to feel like you're in a friendly and welcoming environment, that you are okay to be here. And if people are, being toxic or mean, then that like turns people away and makes them feel like maybe this isn't a place I want to hang out. So we really wanted to make sure that we were, backing up that same statement. Like Classic is not a, is as important to us in terms of its social ecosystem as modern WoW is. And so we wanted to make sure that social contract was something that we presented in both games.
Awesome. Would you like to take the next one, Mel?
Yeah, sure. So we play on Benediction, which I'm sure you guys love, but I
love all the rounds
equally.
Yes, we definitely had a very long queue when the pre-patch initially came out, and then the servers were locked. They took pretty swift action, which was great. But we did hear a rumor that there was like a large bot ban, and then they couldn't make new characters on Benediction because the realm was locked. I was just wondering if there was any.
Yeah, because the queues just instantly disappeared. We didn't know if it was maybe this rumor was true or how well maybe your transfer system has been working.
I can't speak to that specific instant because I wasn't there like looking at like what happened at the moment you saw the queue disappear. But I can say that like all of those are factors. So we have been actually really pleased that the free transfers have been something that people are willing to take. And I think especially people who are like coming back, they don't already have like a deeply ingrained social infrastructure on Benediction. Like maybe they did a couple of years ago and now they're coming back and going like, well, I want to play Wrath of the Lich King, but it's been a little while. I'm coming back. That's like, okay, well, we've got a place where you can play right now. Like you take the transfer. And, that's something we have seen a lot more people than honestly we were expecting to. We kind of felt like this is the only tool we have. Let's use it. And we weren't honestly that optimistic about how many people would want to take those transfers. But we were pleasantly surprised to see that it actually turned like Sulphurus was a pretty small realm into a very healthy, thriving realm, to the point where we actually had to turn the transfers off to Sulphurus because we wanted to make sure that it didn't become too big. And so not right now, like Sulphurus is like a huge success story of like we let Benediction and Fairlena all transfer there, and it actually became not just a healthy like good population realm, but also it turned into a faction balanced realm. And so that was also something we were really pleasantly surprised to see. But you also asked about bots, and yes, we are like as always trying to action bots. And one of the kind of like nice things about the fact that like we locked character creation and transfers into Fairlena and Benediction and some of the other large realms is that if you were a bot and we did suspend you, you can't come back. because it's locked for anybody coming back. So if you're suspended, you're gone for good at that point. And so, you know, it's always a challenge for us to try to like make it like expensive to be a botter, right? Like we're limiting what they can make in terms of money and increasing their costs. And like, you can't make a new character at all. It's like increase your cost to infinity. So we love that. But you know, it's obviously then we've got to go find them and kick them out as well. And that's something we're always doing.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of factors.
I think it was huge. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We do also have like our server engineers are working on the back end to try to find little ways that they can optimize and improve things too. It's often like not something that you can make a huge slam dunk, but they're looking for every little bit that they can eke out so they can raise the realm cap as much as possible without it kind of falling over. So they are working really hard to increase the capacity as well. It's not a thing you can like turn on a dime for. They're like find a little win here and a little win there. And so that combination of all those things, people transferring, minor optimizations and improvements that we can keep making over the next couple of days and weeks, and also the continuing bot bans, all of those things contribute.
I think also it was huge, just the amount of communication you guys have done. It was huge to come out and for you guys to like put the record straight on how layers work, because so many of us were just like, well, why don't they just turn on more layers? And we didn't we didn't understand that only helps in like certain areas, and it doesn't actually make the full capacity of the server better. And we just didn't get that. You know,
I totally know what you mean. It's even right there in the language that players use versus what we use. When you say like server, we say realm, and it's because like really like a server means like a piece of hardware sitting somewhere or a piece of software running on that hardware doing things. And so actually a realm is composed of many servers, and like one of them is the chat server, and one of them is the auction house server, and one of them is the world server that simulates the world. And layering helps that world server simulation. So like, the players that are moving around in a city or in a zone or in a dungeon, those are that world server, and layers helps with that. The other things are things that we could also try to approach and fix as well, but they're all like additional long-term projects. And so we're always looking for like, what's the next bottleneck? What can we remove in terms of like being able to have a larger capacity? But you remove one bottleneck and there's another one behind it. So we're always like, what's the next bottleneck? Is it something we can fix today? Is it something we can fix tomorrow? Is it something we have to schedule out for the next couple months?
Yeah, I just assume I'm a ex-network and systems engineer, and I just always assumed you had a server farm, and most of the servers were now virtual servers.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly how it is, and they're trying to virtualize it even more. But yeah, you're right. At this point, they're running in the cloud, and they have virtualized VMs that are spun up to handle various systems. But even still, as I was saying, right, like there's you log on to your realm, you said benediction for you, right? Benediction isn't just one server running on that VM. It's like a bunch of servers running on a bunch of VMs distributed throughout the cluster that are all sending messages back and forth to kind of keep track of what's going on. So a lot of times people will kind of like jokingly say like, well, why is this hamster wheel? And it's like, it's actually running on pretty beefy hardware. There's really a lot of technical challenges trying to keep all that data moving back and forth, and so that everything's up to date.
Yeah. When everybody talks about, we'll just have them upgrade their hardware, and I don't think you can speak to this, but I assume the bottleneck is on the network side.
I can't speak to the details, but I will say that that is part of the issue. It's not just a matter of like increasing the hardware. We do pay attention to like what the hardware that it's running on is, and our server team is paying attention to that, making sure that they have the beefy servers running on the best hardware that we have available to us, and upgrading that hardware periodically over time. I can't speak again to any of the specifics of it. It is an ongoing process, and Classic is no different than mainline or than modern WoW in that respect. We both are running the modern network stack and the modern infrastructure.
Awesome.
Got it.
Have you felt good about? I've heard. Is this accurate? I've heard you've been locking Horde sometimes and/or Alliance on certain servers to help with PvP balance, faction balance.
I'd love to talk about that. I can't remember exactly which way it was swaying, but Sulphurous was a perfect example of that, where I said that it was a pretty balanced realm. And when we stopped it, it was like, it's about to be full. Let's turn them off. And then we looked at it and we went, oh my God, that faction balance is almost perfect. But if we let a little more in from the low side, it would be completely perfect. And so even though it was good, we were like, we could let a few more. I think it was Alliance in at the time. And so we said, like, this is what we're trying to do is we open up the floodgates for both factions initially. And then if we see it fill up and we say like, I think we could actually make it faction balanced if we left it one way or the other, then we do. so that we can kind of like stop it from hitting the absolute cap while by stopping the dominant faction and letting the other one catch up before it hits the absolute cap. And so that's working pretty well for us. And we're, like I said, very thrilled. Like, we didn't expect to be able to have that much success with this. Historically, it has not been that successful, but this time we're really getting a lot of leverage out of it.
That's awesome.
Well, we give you a real thank you for trying this, because I think that's a really good idea and I really like it. So thank you.
I really have to shout out to the live ops team who's done this, because they've done this for years. And it's one of the things that's been a difficult and ongoing challenge for them, that honestly, it's a endless job of managing realm populations. It is very difficult. And they really stepped up to do what, frankly is a kind of a pain in the butt to kind of keep an eye on this all the time and monitor it as we go out into launch.
Yeah. And I'm sure it changes daily, right?
It does. Yeah. They're monitoring it. Like, I think they have like alerts every hour to check on how things are doing and see if they need to make adjustments. And they don't make adjustments that often, obviously, but that, lets them know like, oh, we think we're going to have to make an adjustment soon and things like that.
Right.
And so, yeah, they're paying really close attention right now.
That's great.
That is great. Do you want to do the next one, Mel? I just keep giving you the hard ones.
Yeah, I know, right? Let me ask the spicy ones. No, I know there's been a lot of controversy on Random Dungeon Finder, and everybody has their own opinions on whether it should and should not be in Wrath. Are you guys still happy with the decision not to implement it into Wrath?
I think so. And I'll reiterate that it's not a universal decision, right? Like, it's not a unanimous decision on the team. We expected this kind of debate because we have it internally. There are people who say like, but I kind of like it. I really wish I could have it. And other people who say like, no, it's really the thing that we want to not have. Like, this is a defining feature for some people to not have it. And I think it's that importance to the people that don't want it that really kind of like speaks out of it. They say like, it feels like it changes the game. You basically end up in a situation where you feel like you have to use it. Where like, instead of like finding your fifth friend, right, when you have a group that was regularly playing dungeons, that fifth friend drops off and you're like, I guess I'll use the random dungeon finder to fill in the fifth slot, and then the fourth and fifth slot, and then the third, fourth, and fifth slot. And pretty soon you're playing with people you don't know anymore. And like, that's just your way of doing it. Whereas if you don't have that like automatic fill in, you start doing that little bit of like extra legwork to like make a new friendship. Who is my fifth person now? And like, if I like playing with someone, like, will I play with them again? Maybe I will, because I don't want to have to, search for them again tomorrow. I'll make a friend with them or make a plan with them. Like, hey, do you want to come back tomorrow and do this dungeon again? So we do think that is important, especially on fresh start realms and things like that, where people are forming these new communities, to get those conversations going, because those conversations about like, I want to do this dungeon together. I want to see you again tomorrow. I want to do this raid in a couple months, right? Those are the things that people build guilds around. It's one of the things that makes new social circles. And we think that that is something that is really important to Classic and something that we're really happy to bring back.
Yeah, I always wanted Random Dungeon Finder, but I wanted it only server only. You know what I mean? Like, only on my server.
We've talked about that too. Actually, like we talk about like where to go with this, because there's some people will say, I want it random, but I want it only on my server. And other people say, no, but I want to be able to invite cross server because my friends had to take a transfer. And so there's always like an argument for each little thing to be taken out. And so we're hesitant to make any of those moves, because any one of them might be the floodgates that lets all of them through. And so we're really nervous about going too far. But I should emphasize, we did improve the looking for group tool. If you were playing in Burning Crusade Classic and you used the looking for group tool, we are making improvements to make it a little bit more like the modern looking for group tool. It's not automatic. It's a bulletin board system where you list your group, and say like, I want to do this dungeon or these dungeons. You can list up to 3, I think, and list your group, or you can list yourself as an individual, so people putting groups together can find you as an individual. And so we do want that to be something that is there, so that you don't have to try to parse through a bunch of text chat. Because especially with the realms getting as big as they are, the text chat was getting so spammy, you basically needed an add-on to manage it anyway. So we said, let's make a persistent bulletin board system. This is really what the game needs.
Yeah.
The only thing that weirds me out is being able to pick tank and stuff when you can't take, when your class can't take and stuff like that. But I'm sure that's stuff you guys are looking into.
Can't, or maybe shouldn't.
My discipline priest is a wonderful tank. I'm just going to let you know that.
I guess that is true, because I did tank the first boss in Mount Hyjal on my rogue on accident the other day. The entire boss, the entire fight.
And so it happens. And so we we talked about this a little bit, and it was a little bit tongue in cheek, and then we decided to go ahead with it. And I think if I remember right, I think right now it is displaying them as like not recommended for your class. And the idea there was, like maybe you want to communicate that you're actually willing to switch to an alt. Or maybe you want to communicate that like, no, I really think I could do it. My pet can take this dungeon, right? Like your pet can take this dungeon, Hunter. Like, but maybe you can. I don't know. I don't want to tell you how to play the game. Or, like maybe we have a shortage of tanks or healers. And so you're like, I think I could actually fill in. I'm willing to do it. I don't think this is a good idea either. I should come as DPS, but if you want me to tank with my pet, I'll do it. Who knows? So we didn't want to like put handcuffs on people and say, you can't tell people what you want to do. But we do want to make sure that people kind of are recommended. Like, yeah, this is unusual. And I think, it's kind of one of those things people are poking fun at us for, but we wanted to try it for a little while and see how it goes. We may change our mind on that in the future, but yeah, for now we want to leave the option open.
Well, Brian, I only have you for just a short couple more moments, and I can't decide between these next two questions. Yeah, it's about the eye level suggested changes in Ulduar, and the other one is about the badges being given for quests that phase you in Northrend. Which one sounds better?
I'm going to try to combine them.
Okay.
So one of the things that we liked about doing the quest reward adjustment was we wanted to make sure that people felt like they were incentivized to like finish those zone capper quests, because a lot of them would like control what phase you're in. And it's the thing that's kind of cool about phasing is that it lets you tell these really immersive stories.
It's really cool
when you get like split across phases. Like one person in your group is in one phase and the other person's in the other one. So we wanted to kind of encourage people to like get to the end, get that zone capper quest, and give you like an emblem off of it, so that you feel like, oh yeah, if I'm leveling an alt, I still feel like this is a worthwhile use of my time. I'm not going to like leave that alt parked in, the beginning phase for the whole expansion. And then like going forward into like the later raids, we were talking about like, hey, as you level up and you go through all these various difficulties of the raid, your gear gets better and better and better. And eventually there's this feeling like, especially like going from Ulduar to Trial of the Crusader, we feel like is the place where there's the biggest friction point. Where
I am with you. Like, I loved this idea. I had this idea about 6 weeks prior to you guys talking about it.
And so, yeah, we've been talking about like that acceleration, right? Like they were at the time trying to figure out like what the right answer was, and they tried something, and we looked back on it and said like, it didn't really feel great to have it like completely obsolete Ulduar. And so we're talking about like, I don't remember what the latest version that we mentioned was, but I think the first thing we might have said in one of the chats was maybe we'll lower the item level of Trial of the Crusader. And then people were like, oh, I don't like that. I want the power that it had. And we're like, what if we raised Ulduar? And so I think that's where we're thinking right now is maybe we'll buff Ulduar a little bit, and then maybe combine that with something like the pre-nerf versions of Ulduar, which are like the one pre-nerf version that maybe would make sense to do. We originally said we were unlikely to do pre-nerf versions of the Wrath of the Lich King raids, but people pointed out like Ulduar actually had some pre-nerf stuff that you could actually do. So we may actually revisit that. And if we bring back the harder version of Ulduar, maybe it makes sense that it gives you a little bit better gear. Yeah, so yeah. We're excited. We're not committed to that yet, but it's something that we're exploring, and we would love to hear some feedback on it.
Yeah, well, I hope you do, because like I wanted either of the options you guys both put out. I mentioned both of them on the show, and it just, for some reason, I don't know why, it just always felt bad for me to go from Ulduar to TOC and just be like, I did all that work in Ulduar, and now the gear looks so much worse compared to TOC, and I think it's a good idea to have, relevant gear from at least the tier prior. So thank you for thinking about it. All right, Brian, we are out of time, but man, thank you so much for joining us. I hope we get to do it again soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Thank you. Awesome. All right, guys, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank you very much for checking out Warcraft Reloaded podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content.